phone's just sitting on a fence recording. And I was working with my young stallion at the time, and I kind of got a little bit, I guess, complacent because I had been doing really well with starting all these young horses. It was about 45 minutes before anybody arrived, and in that time, like, it's quite amazing because I can remember it so clearly, and I kind of had this thought of like, what if this is it? What if this is the end? Like, I've done something major right now. And it was interesting to me that there was no panic in that moment. It was almost like just acceptance of whatever it was to be is just like what it was. And
Okay, hey everybody. I hope you guys are having a beautiful day so far. I wanted to introduce you guys to Ellie O'Brien, and she is from New Zealand, and she is a trainer there. And I'm not sure how I even got to know about you. I think it was probably through Warwick, or I think it was through that one group that we had, or and so I remember seeing some things that I was like, this really aligns with what we're doing here. So thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me on. And yeah, I think it was definitely through one of Warwick's trainers groups. And when I saw that you were interested in Tony Robbins and those sort of people, I was like, oh, this is my sort of person.
So let's start with how you got into horses. You know, and what was the pull for you? Were you born into it, or was it just like, oh, I got into it later? How did that look for you?
Yeah, sure. So apparently my parents aren't really horsey at all. My dad's family had pig hunting horses, so they would go hunting on horses, but they weren't really like into horse training or anything, or the equestrian sports. They were basically just used for bringing food home. But ever since I was tiny, apparently I would sit on the dog and pull his ears and pretend I was riding. So I think it must have been in my blood somewhere. And yeah, so I grew up around the farm horses, and then I think it was by the time I was 6, after begging and begging for riding lessons, I had riding lessons, and then at about 12 I got my first pony of my own, and that was sort of where things started to grow, and show jumping was my thing back then because I was super brave and was really good at staying on, and I was kind of the kid that everyone gave the quote unquote naughty ponies. And so yeah, I had a lot of fun going through pony club, show jumping, and then in my late teens was sort of when I got interested in working with young horses. I started my own horse, and again, that was kind of just flying by the seat of my pants, not really knowing what I was doing, and somehow I managed to get through that unhurt. And then I produced her as a show jumper, and unfortunately, when I was 21, I had a jumping accident and broke my neck. That was the second major accident. and after that, when I came back to riding, because I didn't think I was going to be able to, was sort of when, well, actually I ended up getting a warm blood mare who had been quite badly treated when she was younger. And I sort of tried everything I knew with her, and then I got to a point where I just hit a wall. I couldn't progress any further, And I was kind of like, please, I need something, you know, like putting out this plea or a prayer. And it was quite funny because a week later, a post popped up on Facebook, and it was to work with Dr. Andrew McLean here in New Zealand for a big horse event called Equidays, which is kind of like, I guess, some of the horse fairs over there where there's clinicians that come from all over the place. So that was my first insight into horsemanship and I guess the psychology of the horse, and really understanding how and why. And that then just led me on a big journey. I went on to work with the Double Dans and then Warwick Schiller, and I met Bach through it all. And yeah, when I began to learn all of this stuff, I was just like, wow, this makes so much sense. And I'm so glad that I wasn't attached to my old story of this is how things are done, because without that, it was so seamless to change into, and I guess grow into something that was going to benefit me and the horses a whole heap more.
So how did you get into training professionally? Like, what was that? Did it just happen and next thing you know, you were going, oh, I have horses? Or was it something that I'm going to do this and made that decision?
It was actually really funny. I spent a bit of time over in Australia with the Dans, and Dan James said to me one day, he said, what's your dream? And I was like, I don't know. I was at this funny crossroads point in my life, and I was like, I don't know. I don't have a dream anymore. It sounds so like cliche, but it was a real pivotal point. At that point in time, I was studying a marketing and business degree, and horses had just become a hobby. And you know, like most horse crazy girls, it had always been my dream to work with horses. But you know, people say, grow up and get a real job. And when I guess it was after seeing them and how they were working with their horses, and I came away from that going, you know, my 12-year-old girl dream was to be a horse trainer. So hey, if they can do it, why can't I? And when I came back to New Zealand, I just kind of threw myself into it. I dropped out of my degree. I got in a few client horses, and not really making any money, but it was just to get some experience. There was a trekking place that had 90 horses. So I don't know what you'd call them over there, maybe like a trail camp type of thing. And they had a whole bunch of young horses that needed to be started. So I had bought the Buck Brannaman colt starting DVDs, and I just followed those to a T, and took notes, and I filmed myself, and I'd watch them back and go over my notes, and that kind of just grew. And I guess I got a name for myself through doing that. And then before I knew it, I had people asking to send their horses to me, and now here we are quite some years later.
So what I really want to speak to is, I know that, like I was saying before when we were chatting, that there's so much uncertainty right now. And I know at a time that I'm going to be putting these out to the public, that's what people are in right now. It's this space of we don't know what's happening. We don't know what's going to happen. But that's, interestingly enough, where we live when we work with horses on a regular basis. So it's interesting that it's just being really highlighted for people right now. And what I work a lot with is the focus of, like, it's all perception. You know, what you're going to focus on is what you're going to have your reality be. And even though there's situations that are presented to us that are really big and hard sometimes, that there is a way to see beyond it and through it. And I know that you said you've had a couple of significant accidents. the only one that I'd known of was, I think that I'd seen a video of it actually, like your sister or something had like videoed it and you guys caught it. So what is that lucky story that she caught that on film for you?
I know. Well, it was funny because I was actually alone, and I had two phones at the time for some odd reason, but I'd set one up on the fence to video my session.
Oh, so no one was there videoing it?
No, and so my phone's just sitting on the fence recording, and I was working with my young stallion at the time, and I kind of got a little bit, I guess, complacent because I had been doing really well with starting all these young horses, and I had like this whimsical idea of starting my stallion with no gear on, and which was beautiful, and I had done it before with other horses, but like, I guess that's the uncertainty in horses. You never quite know. Like it can go really, really well, but sometimes it just doesn't. And I'm not too sure exactly what it was that triggered him to explode, but we turned into the fence and turned away from it, and he just leapt into the air and kind of flicked me up into the air. I was just bareback. And I think he was on about his 6th ride, and I think just the way I came down onto my lower back, it was pretty evident right away that something major had happened. I couldn't move at all, and I was thankful that I had my other phone in my pocket, which I always kept on me when I was riding, just because I did work alone a lot of the time. So I was able to call my dad and ambulance and kind of get people on the way. But it was about 45 minutes before anybody arrived. And in that time, like, it's quite amazing because I can remember it so clearly, and it was like a crystal clear blue day. And I kind of had this thought of like, what if this is it? What if this is the end? Like, I've done something major right now. And it was interesting to me that there was no panic in that moment. It was almost like just acceptance of whatever it was to be is just like what it was. And so I kind of just lay there, and my stallion, I had from doing all of our groundwork, he knew to come back and stand with me. And so it was in the video, I think you can see a little bit of it. After I came off, he kind of did the circle around and then came back, and he stood over top of me for 45 minutes, the whole time while we were waiting. And then of course I was whisked off to hospital, and they said that I had exploded my L3, so it was basically shattered into pieces. And I was really, really lucky. For a week we weren't sure if I was ever going to walk again, because there was a piece that was touching the spinal cord, and they weren't able to operate straight away. So it was kind of up in the air for that whole week. That seemed like forever. And in that as well, I had a moment where I was kind of like, oh, the world is falling apart. What am I going to do? Like nothing's the same anymore. What if I can't walk again? And then I kind of came to a peaceful place again, and just sort of said to myself, like, right, no matter what the outcome is, you'll still go on and you're going to be successful, whether that is with the ability to walk again, or if you're in a wheelchair, you'll figure things out. So thankfully they were able to move the piece of bone off my spinal cord. I feel a little bit of weakness down my right side, but nothing major. So yeah, I think that is 5 years ago today. And
today?
Oh, sorry, not today, this year.
I was like, that's weird.
yeah, not today. And yeah, it took 10 months before I could ride again, but it was kind of crazy. I said to the doctor, like, when can I start riding again? And he's like, told me the date. And then so on the date that I was allowed to start riding again, I had 8 client horses booked in, which when I was in that moment, in hindsight, it was like, okay, maybe that was a little bit too much.
He's like, I meant get on and see how it feels, not go back to full-time work.
Yeah, exactly. Needless to say, my muscles got a bit of a wake-up call about getting back into the swing of things.
Yeah, and so how was that for you on like a mental side? Was there moments where you're like, oh, that's interesting, there's fear, or there was apprehension, or was it a heightened awareness, or what did that look like for you?
I wasn't so concerned about being back on the horse in general, because I knew where I had gone wrong, so I could go back and really make sure that I'd filled in all of those holes, so that moving forward, that something like that wasn't going to happen again. The only area that I had a little bit of fear was when the horse, if I turned in towards a fence or something and their hindquarters were facing the fence, that was where I had that moment of like is something going to happen? But other than that, I think I've been lucky to not carry a whole heap of fear with me. And I think my personality, I'm a little bit like the feel the fear and do it anyway. So maybe I am carrying some fear and anxiety with me, and it's manifesting in another way.
Oh yeah. And so for you having that experience and having that kind of deepened level of empathy, do you have clients that come to you that have fear and stuff that's going on, and are there specific things that you give them to be able to help them through that?
Yeah, I do get quite a few people that come to me with the fear and anxiety. And I guess where I'm at in my knowledge is I don't have a lot of tools on like the mental strength aspect, although I would love to. But what I do know is, if they're feeling fear, we break things down as small as we can, so that they're not feeling like they're being thrown in the deep end. And I guess just start like questioning, like, where is this coming from, and going back to that place and building our way forward. But otherwise, I tend to send them on to other people like Jane Pike, who are really skilled in that area, and I focus on the horse side of it.
Yeah. And I'm always speaking to the fact that where we're coming from energetically and how our intentions are such an impact on the way that the horse's behavior is and the way that they perform. Like, do you find that to be pretty significant in the work that you do, or what is your opinion about that, I guess?
Yeah, so our own energy that we carry?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think hugely. I always, like myself, start off my sessions with breath work and grounding myself. Also learning to, I think in the early days, I trained myself really well to push my emotions down. And then later, like probably just in the last year or so, being more aware and saying like, hey, it's actually okay to have emotions, and it doesn't do us it does a disservice to ourselves and our horses if we just try and hide those emotions as well. So being, I guess, congruent with, if we've got stuff going on the inside, then sitting in it and being okay with that, and then moving on through it. So just being aware is probably the biggest thing. Being aware of how we're feeling mentally, physically, spiritually, in New Zealand here, we have a wellness model called Te Whare Tapawha, and it kind of looks at the pillars. So your physical, your mental, emotional, and spiritual, and whānau, which is family. So I like to take that wellness model and apply it to ourselves and our horses, so that if we have anything coming up that we perceive as being negative, then we go back and we look at the pillars of strength and see, like, well, where is this perhaps coming from? Maybe if it's in our horses. I was working with one girl who had actually bought a horse off me, and he was just a super cool dude. And at our property, he had always been in a herd. We had really lovely big paddocks. So his I guess his pillars of strength were all really, really strong. And then because of her situation, she was at a boarding school, so he had to go into a really small paddock. He was on his own in there, and she started to see these behaviors come up where he was not very happy. And so we talked about this wellness model and kind of looked at, like, okay, well, his environment is not very strong, so because of that, there's nothing we can really do about it. But then where else in the pillars can we make it even stronger, so we can kind of make up for that lack of in another area? So that went off on a tangent, but
that's really good. Yeah, there's nothing so formal here, obviously, but that's a really cool thing to be able to say, okay, well, there isn't anything we can do about this piece, but here are the things that we can do to balance it out. Yeah, that's good. Well, I like that. So I also know that you've recently had a baby. Good for social media. I feel like I know so many people that I don't actually know. And so for you, I know there's a lot of people that I get either have had accidents and then they're getting back into riding, or they had horses when they were young and then now they're older and have gotten back into it. So there's these different, I think, life stages. And I know that you already have an older daughter, right, from before. But I had a couple clients in the last year or two that were pregnant, rode through their pregnancy. I did. I had a scheduled C-section. So I was like, I'm riding till the day. But once you restart riding and then balancing that, the kids and then the horses and then having it be your profession. And so I know that there's a lot of people that watch and go, well, what's right and what's wrong and what should I be doing? And so just what did that look like for you when you were like, I'm going to have a baby and this is what's going to happen?
Yeah.
How was it for you?
Yeah, so I rode probably till about 8 months. But I think because of my previous injuries, I couldn't ride right through like I had planned on. So I had to really listen to my body and be like, okay, it's getting a little bit too much now. So we played on the ground a little bit, and that was fun. I had stopped doing client horses, and I was just teaching and doing the online side of things as well. And then after I had him, I think, oh gosh, I can't even remember. It was pretty soon that I was back in the saddle again. I was really lucky to have a beautiful, easy birth and with no complications. And my partner and I had decided that to set up our lifestyle, I guess, so that we could both be working from home and support one another and together raise our baby. And I ended up getting client horses back, and he was only 4 weeks old. And so in hindsight, I think that was probably a little bit too soon. But I think that you kind of just have to play and you have to try things and then pivot. If isn't working. So through that process, it was a little bit too much, and then I had to decide, okay, well, let's make life a little bit easier. And I had a friend say to me the other day, she said, well, like, I don't know how you were back riding so soon. And I said to her, yeah, but I gave myself postnatal depression because of it, because I put all of the pressure on myself. And when I was in that place and riding horses, I was thinking, God, I would give anything to be one of those mums that can be inside and just being a mum right now. So I said to her, like, yeah, just because I was riding doesn't mean that it was like the best thing, and that you should judge yourself and think that you should be out there riding as well. So I think it's just trying things out, listening to your body. If you can't get out there and ride, then does it really matter in the scheme of things? Yeah, and so now I just have my own horses that I'm playing around with, and that's really cool, because then it doesn't matter if I don't get out and ride that day. If things are too much, I can kind of just put it off to the next day, and or the next time that feels right to be able to get back on board again.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a big thing, that having that expectation of, okay, this is what it's going to look like, especially for me when I had my first son. I was 26, and I had only been training for 2 years, and I was really busy at this boarding facility that I had been at. And I remember I got pregnant. It definitely wasn't planned. It was with a partner I'd had for a long time, but the first thing everybody said was, that's too bad, because you looked like you had a lot of potential to be a good trainer. I got that from multiple people, and I was like dead set on, like, I'm going to show you how fast I'm going to get back out there and take on all the clients, and I'm gonna, but so what I did was I had a working student who homeschooled, and she had a horse in training with me. So I just traded for when I would ride, she would be there with, my son and push him in the stroller and whatever, because he was so tiny, and what do they do when they're so little? They just lay there. It's easy. But I remember being kind of frustrated at that. Like, I'm letting other people dictate and it was just ego. It was like, I'm going to show you, but it was like, I don't think I want to be doing this, but I'm going to do it because they said I couldn't,
Yeah.
So it's like letting go of that expectation of what other people think you should be doing, and being okay with being like, it's not working for me, and I'm going to honor how I feel about this situation and change what I'm doing. I think that's important for new moms to hear, because that postnatal depression, I mean, there are things that you can do to eliminate, if it's an outside source that you're actually bringing into your life to make it harder, then look at that and stop it.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, being aware of those things, and I suppose it really helps having people around you that can support you in that. And because I think sometimes when you're in that place, it's hard to step back and say, like, am I bringing some of this in as well? Do I need to be kinder to myself? And often that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that listening to your body and checking in and going, okay, but what am I bringing in that I don't have to be? And then why am I doing that? And how am I going to take care of myself? For your horses too. It's funny because I have a lot of people that come, and everyone likes to say, my horses are my escape. My horses are where I come to get away. And I keep going back to, that's great, but your family, your home life, that is where you're supposed to be solid. However it looks, whether you're a single parent or you're in a relationship or not, like, that is your grounding point, and everything else is sprinkles on top. I feel like also when you come out with that expectation, like this is going to make me feel better, and then it doesn't look like we think it's going to look, then everything kind of falls apart.
Yeah, that's right. And I kind of think my horse should not have to bear the burden of my problems, that like he should not be my escape. I should be bringing to him my peace so that he can feel good in and around me, because otherwise I think then we end up passing those things onto our horses a lot of the time, and it might not be in that day, but perhaps later on down the track that we start to see some of the things that we have inadvertently put on them.
Right. And I know when we chatted a while back, you had talked about that mind, body, spirit connection with the horses and the groundwork. And what does that look like for you when you're getting present and you're working in that space? I just think, what, you know, for you, like, what does that look like when you're focused there?
Yeah, so I began, shall I just tell the story of how I came across it perhaps?
Yeah.
So I had a horse come to me who he was a very, very talented, and like what often can happen is when we have a horse that is really, really talented, his mental strength was not matching his physical ability, and so mentally he was pretty fried, to the point of he would colic if you changed him into a different paddock. He would colic at dinner time, just very, very wound tight. So he came to me to work on that side of things, and as it does, you know, you can think that it's going to be maybe a short process, but it turns out it leads you down a rabbit hole. And on one of the days early on, I had a body worker come and do some work with him, and she was trying to do some work on his face because he hated his face being touched and he hated having the bridle band put on. And so she was trying to do this work, and he's over 17 too, and he was like, you are not touching me. And he had a pretty good habit of just bowling you over with his shoulder. And as a lot of people would do, she kind of got big and blocked him and sort of bumped him away. And it didn't fix anything. She couldn't touch him still, and he was just like, this isn't happening. So in that moment, I thought, what would happen if I tried to do exactly what she was doing, trying to touch his face, but what if I just moved with him? And so the next time I was out there, I tried that, and it really blew me away because he kind of like melted into my hand, and we moved together. And in that moment, I was practicing all of the things that I practice when I do my mindfulness and my meditation. So my breathing, focusing on being present. If thoughts come in, then acknowledge them, and then gently bring my mind back to the present again. And letting myself feel emotions as well. So I moved with him, and he kind of like really put a lot of force into my hand, but we just moved together and kind of like went around the round pen in weird directions and everything that training would tell you not to do, because hey, you're not meant to take a step backwards, and you're not meant to let your horse be in your space. So we were breaking all the rules. But all of a sudden he stopped and just began to like release and like roll in his eyes. All the veins in his face kind of started like you could really visibly see them, breathing deeply. So just really processing. And so I kept on repeating that. And at first I just did it on his face. And eventually I could touch him all over his face, and without him needing to move, without him having to have any releases, because what it felt like is he had been able to process that trauma, whether it was physical trauma or emotional, mental trauma. He was able to kind of like through movement and me listening to him, he was able to work through it. And then after that, I thought, well, wonder what would happen if I did it on other parts of his body. And I put that into also doing some breath work with my hand near his tummy because of the colicking. And that was a beautiful story as well. So we had practiced that again, lots of releases, and he hadn't colicked in a long time. And one day I moved him to a new property, and he started to colic. He was kind of like dropping to the ground, and then he'd get up and then run, and then he'd drop to the ground. And I went out into the paddock, and he came up to me, and he kind of like yelled his hindquarters over and put his stomach at me. And so I'm like, okay, I guess we're doing this. And because he's massive, like he towers above my head, so his energy was very intimidating, but I kind of just had to trust in that process and what he was asking. So I put my hand out onto his tummy and practiced doing our breathing, which was really hard because I'm trying not to be terrified as well. And he just stood there and we breathed together. And then once he was done with that, he kind of just moved away and lay down like flat out on the ground and probably stayed there for around 5 or so minutes. And then he got up and went and grazed, and he has not colicked since that day. So that was really cool. So he was kind of my insight into the mind-body connection, and I guess just applying all of the, like I said before, applying all of the things that I had learned in my practices away from horses into being with them, and being aware of like how my energy and hands-on or hands-off as well, how I could connect and influence the horse to be able to let go of tension that they were holding. So yeah, and now every time I meet a horse, we always start off in that place of connecting myself and them, and the mind-body connection, my mind and body to their mind and body, and then taking that through into our ridden work as well. And for me, like learning that process on the ground first, and then developing it into a place where you can still practice that while you're doing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what do you think it is about putting your hands on those spots? I do something similar, which I have never been formally trained or educated in any type of body work, but I know for a long time that early in my training I would do this, and it didn't happen until probably maybe a little over a year ago, where I started to make the connection where when I couldn't get a horse to flex around, I would just place my hand on the base of their neck because there's always so much tension there. And I would just tell people, I feel like it's because sometimes they've just disassociated with certain parts of their body, and they don't even realize that you can bend here when they're so stiff for so long. But there's a couple other things that I do where it is much like that. I had a horse here that was super cinchy, and it would try to bite in the cross ties. And one day I took the video out there and I set the phone up and I had him in the cross ties, and I would just put my hand the first place that triggered him, and I would stay there until he would switch over and start to kind of release, and I would go to the next spot and he'd pin his ears and I would just stay there. It took probably an hour. And I was like, I don't even know if what I'm doing is going to make a difference, but then I could touch him. So I was like, okay, well, we'll see. And then the next day I came out and put the video camera or the phone up, like thinking, okay, this could just be, at least no one's watching. Like maybe that was a huge, like nothing. And
Yeah.
Cat was completely fine. Like there was no cinchiness left. And I was kind of just like, okay, but what happened? You know what I mean? It was, for me in my head, I made it, we were rewriting the neural pathways and the story about what it was to be touched here, instead of having them just stay in that fight and then putting the stuff on and keeping going. It was like, I'm going to stay here until you realize this isn't as bad as you think it is. But I'm sure there's probably a deeper, more like scientific reasoning behind it that I just don't know. But that's what I've equated it to. What do you feel? What is the idea about it that is what makes the difference when you do stuff like that?
Yeah, I think it's bringing awareness, isn't it? And it's probably like, I think of it, it's a little bit like us, until we bring awareness to something, then like you say, like maybe we've dissociated and blocked that out. And after all, I think if we remember that they're prey animals, so they're wired for survival. So if there's been trauma in a place, whether that's been mental or physical, they've kind of just blocked it out. And maybe like the fight is what I've kind of noticed is fight is often their last place that they go to if they feel like they can't take flight and they can't, and perhaps they've been pushed past the point of freezing. Fight is their only option that's left. And so, when we bring awareness to that place and just sit with it, it's like they just go through the process of working through it, and they no longer have to block it out anymore. And that's where I guess I found the movement to be really good, because I feel like I'm saying to them, hey, look, like you can still move. You still have the ability to survive here in a way that is more, I guess, in a positive way, rather than in having to go to that place of freezing or fighting. But yeah, I would love to know more about the science behind it. But then in some ways I'm like, but do I want to know more about the science behind it? Because if I do understand more of the science, that take away from just that innate ability to feel and to listen. So I don't know.
I don't know if I want to know too much.
Yeah. Because I don't want rules,
So we can wrap up by chatting about some of the programs that you have. I know you mentioned that you're doing some online stuff, and so what is that like? What is the stuff that you have that you're doing right now?
So I created a Start Your Own Horse course, which I really love doing. I was sort of inspired to create this because I had lots of horses being sent to me to restart. People had sent their horses away to trainers and then just got back a broken mess. So I thought, right, I'm going to teach people how to do it themselves, because it's not that hard when you understand how to do it. So yeah, that's one of my babies. And then we also have a float or trailer loading course as well. And then also just like regular general training videos and a membership program. So yeah, I really love doing those things, and it's super cool to see probably like yourself working with people is sort of seeing them empowered to be able to understand the how and the why and be able to do it for themselves.
Right. Okay. Everyone's thirsty now. So that's amazing. So also I feel like for people that if they just feel like I have a horse and I'm riding it, but I do feel like there's holes, it's something that they could get into as well. Like the Start Your Horse program could be for, I think my horse has already started, but I think there might be holes. Is that something that would be good for them too?
Yeah. We have quite a few people that go through it to restart their horses, and they like that it is a step-by-step approach. And then, because every horse isn't the same, we have like the online group that people can ask questions, and then we can sort of tailor it to like, okay, maybe that exercise isn't what you need right now. How about we do this exercise as well? So I think it gives people a really good understanding of the principles and the skills, and then throughout it all, as they're learning, I think they begin to become more creative and realize that like, yeah, this is the kind of plan of how to start your own horse, but I can listen to myself and I can listen to my horse within that as well.
Right. Yeah, that's the good part. That's what I love, is I tell people this is one way to do it, but you have to go with your gut, and you know your horse. So if there's something that needs to be changed, don't look to me to tell you exactly what to do, because if you think it's better, then do that. And the worst that's going to happen is it won't work out like you thought it would, and then you can try something else.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, we're all here just trying to figure it out too. We've just been doing it longer.
Yeah, I did a business course quite a few years ago, but I can always remember on my first day, and the teacher, he said, it's the funniest thing to walk into a business meeting, because there's all these men in suits and they're all pretending to know what they're doing, but they don't. And I just thought, yeah, that's so true for horses as well. You're always just failing forward.
So we'll wrap up here, but is there anything that you feel like you want to say to make it complete, or do you feel like you've said everything?
Oh, I think I've said a lot.
I want to check in and make sure people aren't like, oh, there's this one thing that I wanted to say that I thought of that I didn't say.
Yeah, that always comes at night time when you're lying in bed.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us and making the time. Yay that we figured out the same time.
Yeah.
I'm calling that a win on its own for me. And so I'll make sure that I post your website and everything in the notes so people can figure out how to find you if they're interested in your programs and they know how to contact you. And yeah, and thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
No worries at all. Thank you so much for asking me to come on.
Yeah, all right. I will talk to you later.